Save big money on pressure-treated lumber for your outdoor project at Menards. Menards has the best in-stock selection of AC2 pressure-treated lumber, decking, and fencing. All easy to load in our drive-through lumber yard. Choose from our huge inventory and build your project to last. Plus, you can get free estimates fast with our fence and deck design programs in-store or online at menards.com.
Save big money at Menards.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
This is the CRM Archaeology Podcast. It's the show where we pull back the veil of cultural resources management archaeology and discuss the issues that everyone is concerned about. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 293 of the CRM podcast. This is Doug, based in Scotland. I will be the main host for today's episode, and today I am joined by Heather in California.
Hi, everyone.
That is all I'm joined by today. So we're going to be doing something a little bit different this episode, and we're going to be learning a bit about Heather. This is Heather's origin story episode. So, jumping right into it, Heather, I'm pretty sure you've mentioned this in previous podcasts and stuff, but archaeology is your second career? Third career? You had a career before archaeology, right?
I had a few careers before archaeology. I would say my first actual career was I was an ice hockey referee, professional ice hockey referee. And I started that as a young person and moved up the ranks. And about my sixth year was contracted by a professional hockey league. And I refereed professional hockey for 8 years and then also did international. I was registered with the International Ice Hockey Federation, which is who staffs all of the World Championships and Olympics. And each country has an allotted amount of officials that can work those every year. And so I was registered on that list for 10 years, along with about 28 others. And then I started a family. I had my son, Connor, and then a few years later, Chloe. And I decided that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so I did a lot of gig stuff, a lot of, like archaeologists do. So it's kind of been in my blood for a while, and just did a lot of side work in order to be able to stay at home and raise my kids until they started going to school regularly. And then I went back to school. And I had learned a vocation of upholstery. So I did auto, boat, marine, and home furniture upholstery. And then I ended up teaching upholstery and got my teacher's credential doing that. So I did teaching upholstery through an adult school. And I did that for years. And that's actually part of what I did to work my way through graduate school was teaching upholstery.
I might just pull back just a step or so. When you say professional ice hockey, so I know vaguely like NHL, and I do know just from, being from a smaller town, there's also leagues below that,
Yep.
that we had one. So what sort of level were you doing? And when you say international, you mentioned the Olympics and stuff like that. It sounds, sorry, this is going to just be a complete aside. We haven't delaying you're getting to archaeology yet, but can you tell me a little bit more about, ice hockey? Sorry, it's such an interesting thing that I don't know anyone who, involved in professional.
I actually think that my refereeing capabilities have absolutely helped me be a better archaeologist and certainly a better manager. So I worked, there's several levels. There's something called Junior A, which is the highest level of amateur hockey that somebody plays in. And sometimes people that start going in, they get drafted into the professional ranks, specifically NHL, will either play or they'll either be drafted from Junior A or more often than not, they're drafted from college ranks, but it's either or. They can. And so I worked that hockey for a while, Junior A hockey, which is a high level. And then I refereed a few leagues actually that were they've moved around a lot, as far as the levels. And so generally just for those that are into hockey, it's the farm leagues for NHL teams. And And then for international hockey, I did World Championship. I refereed a tour prior to the Olympics. So I traveled around and I did all the Olympic teams and the pre-games for the Olympics. And yeah, and I've been in it since I was 17 years old. I'm still involved in it. I really enjoy mentoring other officials. I have scheduled various rinks. Right now I schedule a local rink in Goleta or Santa Barbara, California, and enjoy sharing the community with new people. And yeah, it's in my blood. It'll never leave.
Never leave.
Yeah, it'll never leave.
Understandable. And so you did stay at home mom, and then you picked up a trade doing upholstery.
Yes.
And you went back to school. Couple of questions there. Why archaeology? Well, I have a budget question. I'm just going to throw them out there so I don't forget them. But it's why archaeology, and why not just sticking with upholstery? And also, can you tell me a bit about the timing of when you decided to go back, because your kids had hit a certain age, or what was the reasoning there?
So I had been into archaeology as a young person from a really early age. I'm going to date myself, but I had a pen pal. I don't think they're really popular anymore, but you would send in your name and to I forget the name of the company, but it was, back in the 80s, and you send in your name and then they match you up with someone else, across the world, in another part of the world, typically, that's around your age. And then you start conversing back and forth through mail. And so I was connected with a young man about my age who lived in Cairo, Egypt. And his name was Hashim Muhammad Ali. And I'd love to reconnect with him, maybe someday. I've tried it, and it's a popular name, I found out. So it'll be difficult. But anyway, and he introduced me to pictures of Cairo and the pyramids. And it just, I'm only 8 at the time, or 7. I'm 8 at the time when I started, 7 or 8. And so, the concept of pyramids was kind of unique to me. I don't even know if I had known about them. Maybe I did, but I certainly learned a lot more about them through Hashim. And he was a much better pen pal than I was. And he would send me all these different, pictures that either he would draw or postcards that he would send me, and he would explain about the beautiful pyramids. The other thing he introduced me to was Donna Summer, which is funny. The singer Donna Summer and all of her music. And so we conversed back and forth, and that is what started my interest in archaeology. My dad's a physicist, a high energy theoretical physicist. And his answer to everything is, if you're interested in it, he throws an old textbook at you and he says, here, read it. And if you're more interested, I'll get you more books. And so I started reading, and I couldn't stop. I was just enamored with the subject. And then he started throwing me actually old books by, so funny, Brian Fagan, who ends up, he was chair at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where I live. And it's funny how things work out that way. I grew up in Chicago area, the Chicago suburbs. And so I just started reading, and then he started getting me magazines, and they were quarterly magazines about archaeology. And I would read them probably multiple times until my next issue came. I was just loved the subject. And so that stuck with me throughout my life. And actually, because of my hockey career that took off right at the age, my early 20s, I didn't actually go to college. Actually, it was my late teens that it took off, and then went into professional hockey. But I was so busy with that career that I actually ended up not going to college right away. And so, but I've always been a learner, and I love learning new things, diving in and just researching. And because of that, I have a great respect for people that don't go to college. I don't automatically assume that they're not educated. You can certainly self-educate, right? And some of our greatest philosophers and people that think things through, and they don't always have that the formal education it's their own personal pursuit of knowledge that ends up, informing them, their thoughts or theories, who they are. And so anyway, when I was teaching upholstery, it turned out that they changed the rules at the adult school as part of the school district that you had to have a teaching credential. And so in order to have a teaching credential, I had to have, and this is a little bit of a shocker, I had to have a high school diploma, which I did not. I did. In theory, I did. I had finished high school, but I had homeschooled because I was a competitive figure skater. And so I was homeschooled my last 2 years of high school. And the school that I was homeschooled through, was, early, obviously in the 80s, was not accredited and they wouldn't accept that diploma. So I had to go and get a GED. And it's just kind of this roundabout way of how I got back to school. And I got the GED, and I can't remember what the score was, but it was so high that they thought that I had cheated on it. And so I took it at this community college, and the community college, the person that was in charge of that department pulled me in and said, he told me, because, when we were looking at your score, we thought maybe you cheated. He goes, but we were like, there's no way you cheated here. And he says, I'm bringing you in because I want to encourage you to go to college. I think I would be doing a disservice if I didn't tell you that you should go to college, and this should not be your end. I know you're doing this to get a credential, a single subject credential, so you can continue to teach upholstery, but I think you should go to college. And that I'd always thought about doing it, but my life went another direction. And so that's what kind of started my process towards going to school. And so I went to a community college, and that is actually where I met Andrew. And he was my first professor. And I went to community college, and then I went to a university, Cal State University. I got my bachelor's, and I immediately got my master's right after that. So I've been doing a lot of talking. I'll let you.
Well, I have questions about that, but we'll pick up on your education or university education when we get back from the break.
What makes for a great vacation? Depends on who you ask. Are you looking to get away or bring everyone together? Do you want to get outside and play or see a play at the plate? Fortunately, however you operate, I'm the destination you've been looking for. The name's Missouri, but you can call me Mo. And I have just one question. What's your MO? Come see me at visitmo.com.
Stay cool and choose from over 40 in-stock ceiling fans for under $100, plus an 11% rebate at Menards. We carry the largest selection of in-stock Hunter ceiling fans, available in a variety of designs, finishes, and features. Create the perfect look and lighting for any room with a new Hunter ceiling fan. Visit Menards.com and view our entire selection of Hunter ceiling fans, plus the weekly flyer and other great deals going on now.
Save big money at Menards.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Welcome back, everyone. Heather is giving us the lowdown on her history and life as it moved into archaeology. And where we left off was university. So, Heather, you'd mentioned you'd gone community college first. Then, so did you do sort of an associate's, or like the first two, the equivalent of, first 2 years, and then move over to bachelor's? And then did you go straight into a master's? And sorry, I'm going to throw a bunch of questions at you so I don't forget them. Also, did you work in archaeology, or did you go straight through degrees and then jump into archaeology?
So it was a community college. I think I did get an associate's just because that's the way it was set up. And not all community colleges have it set up in that way. You don't necessarily have to, you can just go straight into the university system, the 4-year system, using the credits that you have and then just moving forward if you don't feel like getting an associate's. But I think the way this program was set up, and also I tend to like to take a lot of classes every semester. And so I think maybe that was the other reason. But so I did get an associate's, but that wasn't, I really didn't have that as a goal. I had 4 years as a goal. Not when I started though. So when I started, it was just putting my toes in the water a bit. And my daughter was still young. She was in preschool, if I remember correctly, but she was not in kindergarten yet. My son was in like first or second grade. And so, I was working around their schedule and around preschool and then also doing night classes. And then I got some encouragement from professors there. This was a lot of, I was always a good student, but, you forget things when it's been that long. And so, I had some challenges and, wondering, is this really what I should be doing? And then, but eventually I did end up going because I loved it so much. And I decided I wanted to have a career in archaeology pretty quickly. And Andrew definitely encouraged that. And so did some of my other professors. And so I actually was able to start a career in archaeology. I was monitoring for a small company that had a large, had a contract, a government contract. And so I had work right away. The other thing, the actual reason why I got that job was because immediately I decided when I started that I wanted to intern and really kind of dive in and get some experience. And so I had started working at a museum, working with their collections, and decided that I wanted to kind of do a capstone senior project. Not that was necessary. It was not necessary at the university to have something like that. But I decided that I wanted to have something that most of my papers and most of the research that had to have some continuity would be based on. And so also I'm a very practical person. So I wanted to learn a skill set that I thought would be marketable, that would help me get a job quicker. And so I picked faunal analysis after talking to several, different people. And that was suggested that I go into faunal analysis. So that's what I did. And so I think that answers one of your questions. And then I went immediately straight into getting my bachelor's. And then, yes, right away, as soon as I finished my bachelor's, I went into my master's. And that subject, the collection that I worked on was for my master's carried me throughout my entire academic career. And I did work, one of your questions, did I work full time? I did. I worked full time throughout. I was teaching upholstery at first, and I was doing that full time. And then, I was teaching
doing school full time as well.
I did.
It part time?
It was full time. So I had a full time schedule.
So you were doing like 20 hours of school plus 40 hours of work.
Yes. And a lot of the work that I did in the very, very beginning, I was teaching. It was a pretty decent schedule. And it was nice because I could take my kids with me to the school. So they hung out with me there. And it was, it was fun, actually. We made it fun. They were familiar with the campus because that's where they went to preschool. And then I also was doing upholstery for clients on the side. And that was something I could do at home. So when I wasn't at school, I was at home doing work and doing that out of my garage. And then first 2 years I was married, and then I separated from my husband. And so I was a single mom, and I didn't have any financial help from him. And so I actually was, I had to work pretty hard in order to be able to go to school and support my kids. So I ended up living in housing and for the university. And even though it's a commuter campus, it has a fairly large residential campus attached to it. And so I found out that you could be a community advisor or a CA, right, to whichever area you were living in or to the whole entire residential campus, and your rent would be free. It wasn't free. You worked for it, but you wouldn't have to pay it in monetary ways. You would be paying it through your time. And it was actually a very flexible job because I was, I could do a lot of what I did with the community advisement, I could do with my kids. I ended up being the community advisor for the faculty and graduate housing. And then I kind of moved up the ranks there. And I did that throughout my graduate school. And so we lived there for about, 7 years, I think. It was at the end of my undergraduate. So I got it actually right away. So that helped alleviate some of the cost. And I didn't teach upholstery anymore, but then I started working regularly. So I actually was working a full-time job plus a part-time job plus going to school full-time. So
when did you sleep?
That's a good question. I still don't sleep very much. I've never been a major sleeper. I am good if I get 5 hours sleep, 4 or 5 hours sleep. I was a competitive figure skater earlier in my life. And so I woke up every morning at 4 to go skating before I went to school. And then I would go to school and then I would train some more in the afternoon and evening. And so I was going to school like a normal kid would. And then I was also skating about 8 hours a day and skating and training 8 hours a day. So that schedule was not foreign to me. And I think it set me up, for better or for worse, to be a bit of a workaholic. But so that's been my life, my entire life. And my mom had her own business and I worked and did, and helped her as most people do when their parents have their own business. And so I worked and helped her in whatever tasks that she needed from a very early age. So I've always been very active and busy.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it hasn't quite stopped. Ever.
No, no, it hasn't. But actually, it's not a bad, I love it. I wouldn't know what to do. I mean, if I retire, I'll probably just find something else, some other activities to do. I'm not really good at sitting and not doing anything. And usually if I am sitting and not doing anything, I'm infamous for falling asleep immediately. So if we try to watch a movie, I only make it like a quarter of the way through, usually, unless it's a really good movie.
You're just making up for all that lost time and sleep.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and I'll try to rephrase this so I'm not putting words into your mouth, but in a sense, it sounds like you said pretty early on you decided you wanted to make archaeology a career, and so then you moved straight in from bachelor's to master's. I'm assuming that was calculated in that you probably were familiar with the Secretary of Interiors, or at least understanding that you need a master's to be permitted. Is that true? And was that all planned as in CRM?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination. I decided that I knew that although I thought I was getting a good education, I did not know what I needed to know in order to be a good archaeologist. That came because I was working in archaeology while I was getting my undergraduate. I was very fortunate in that way. And I had a job right away. I'd only had been in school a couple of years and I had this great job. It was prevailing wage, so I got paid well. It was a great opportunity. And it was also a super fun cleanup site. So I got, just initiation by fire, I guess, and really understood pretty quickly what was required if I wanted to move forward and move up in that career. And then I also knew that I didn't have enough education with the undergrad. There just was not enough there. There's too much in the business to really teach you everything you need, even in a really good CRM program. And I think it was in a pretty good program that was definitely geared towards at least giving you some initiation in the understanding of CRM rather than just academic archaeology. But even then, I still didn't have everything I needed, I thought, in order to become, an archaeologist and move up the ranks. And so I also was, a lot of my colleagues that I worked with, they were working on their masters. And so it just seemed like a natural progression for me. Plus, I do love school. I really love learning. And I had a lot of people encouraging me to do that. And so that's how I ended up going to graduate school. I really didn't have there was no lapse in time. I just kept going. And the nice thing was I had a job. And so it wasn't like I had to stop in order to get a job. I was working. So it was very busy, but it was a good situation.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I have some questions about how that worked out with both school and work. So we'll see you guys on the other side of the break.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Welcome back to this episode of the CRM podcast as we delve into Heather's origin story. Heather, you'd mentioned both working and then also doing a master's and, also working at the various times. Also, I think you're undergraduate as well. How did you manage that? Was it like night classes sort of thing? Or did your company have some of those programs where they, let you out for like a day or something to go do your master's?
So I'm having to go back into my crevices of memory here. But in undergrad, while I was working undergrad, you usually, if you're strategic about it, you can put all your classes in a few days, right? And pile them up, or you have night classes too. So that's what I did was I had night classes. And then I had maybe 1 or 2 days where I could not work. So I'm an as needed, even though I'm working full-time hours. I was an as needed. So it wasn't like I had certain days that I had to be there. I told them this is when I had classes and they worked around my schedule. And then as far as the also working for the university, that was something that was a lot of times was early mornings, late at night, and tasks that you could accomplish, in between things on your own schedule. And then also just living. That's why you got free rent, because when you're living there, it's 24/7. You're always supposed to be available to the students and the residents. So that's how that worked in my undergrad. And then when I was in graduate school, a lot of the classes were at night, and there were some day classes, and I just worked around the schedule. I had wonderful support network. I had a best friend who was just wonderful. She was like a second mom to my kids, and I was that for her daughter. And it had been that way since our kids were young. We knew each other since our kids were born, basically. We knew each other, and our kids were only 6 months apart, her daughter and my eldest. And so being able to have that support network was helpful. I did not have family that lived here, not my own personal family, although my mom sometimes would come in and stay with me for some time. Sometimes if I had a really heavy load, she would come in and stay with me for a period of time. And that was always a big help. So that's how I was able to make that work. And then when I went to graduate school, it was a little bit more flexible because of the schedule that university had. And then also, the work, I just did things in between. Every little crevice of free time I had was taken up by studying or doing other tasks so that I could study. And I did a lot of stuff in my car. I learned, I still, when I'm in the field, I have no problem working on the computer in my car. I have a whole setup for it, even attached screens. I have 3 screens. Like I had these portable monitors that you can attach to the computer monitor, and allows me to have 3 screens. And so I actually like to work out in the field in the truck. But so it was always just finding a way. It wasn't easy. That's for sure. It wasn't easy. And I had just wonderful, supportive professors too, that would allow me to bring my kids with me to the lab, or, if I was doing stuff, had keys so I could go there at any time of the day or night to do my work. And my kids, it wasn't just me getting, my graduate degree or my undergraduate degree. It was the team of me and my kids. And I even put that in my opening to my thesis, is that I hoped that they would look at that journey as being something we did together as a team, something great, something pretty cool that we did together as a team. And it definitely helped our relationship, I think. I don't know how it would have been if it was otherwise, but we're very close. And I think that it taught them lessons that things are not easy. Things that are worthwhile are not easy. And you have to pull inspiration from lots of different areas in your life and in you personally to get through things and to accomplish things that are worthwhile. So, and then I was obviously motivated to giving my kids a better life and being able to be financially stable so that they then could go and, so that they could continue to thrive.
And you chose archaeology.
And then I chose, I chose archaeology.
No, I know it's somewhat of a joke here, but we've talked about this many times on the podcast that, there's many ways of doing archaeology, and there are fairly stable careers that you can have in it and fairly well-paying jobs as well.
Yes, there is, but you have to have gumption. It's funny because it's just popping in my head. When I was in graduate school, it's a 3-year program, but most people were taking about 5 years to finish it. And because it was a rigorous program, it's a very good graduate program. And I had bitten off a lot for my thesis, but I was determined. I was a single mom working that I needed to get, even though I was in the workforce, I needed to get to my next step that I had in my mind that I needed to accomplish. And in order to do that, I needed that schooling. I needed my graduate degree, and I needed more time with my kids so that I wasn't constantly struggling. And so I was just struggling, but I could reduce some of the hours that I was dedicating to working and going to school. And so at some point, at the end of my 3 years, it was near the end of my 3 years. I needed to continue. And there was somebody that was wonderful, very supportive and everything. But I remember this person was reviewing my thesis, and they said, Heather, I think it needs one more. And this is a very well-respected person. And he told me, I think this needs one more year. You need to be in one more year. And I looked at him. I said, no, that's not going to happen. I need to go get a job. I was not some person that just had this, inordinate amount of time that I could just continue to go to school. I cannot do this. I worked very hard to be able to finish this in 3 years. I am going to finish it in 3 years. And I think that gumption and that fortitude, I think, helped me advocate for myself. And not that he was trying to hold me down at all. He wasn't. And in fact, I asked him, he just didn't have the time. He had not reviewed it. And so he was just kind of going along the line that a lot of other people did. And that was, it's okay if it's graduate school, you take another year, take out more loans. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so I really advocated for myself. And I ended up, he was wonderful. He actually basically blocked out an entire week. And he had not reviewed anything yet. And so what we did was every chapter or every 1 or 2 chapters, he would review it. He would give me the hard copy of it. I would take it home. I would make all the revisions that he suggested. I'd work on, beefing up this or whatever, deleting some areas that really weren't relevant. And then I would come back the next day, give him the new version, the revised version for him to look at again. He'd give me the next 1 or 2 or 3 chapters. I would take those home, and we did this every day, back and forth. And we got it done. We got it done in time. I submitted it, and I got my degree in 3 years. And it was not easy. And it was definitely an aggressive schedule, but I made it happen. And I think sometimes having some worldly or some experience outside of archaeology can give you that courage. So I think a lot of times returning students, it's a benefit. Their life experience is a benefit because you have more perspective than somebody who just went through school and hasn't, worked all that much or hasn't had other struggles in their life. I mean, everybody has struggles, but hasn't been seasoned by life yet. And I think advocating for myself has definitely helped me climb up the ladder as well.
And once you left grad school, did you continue working for the same company that you were?
Mm-hmm.
And what's been your career since then in archaeology? And did you I mean, we're talking monitoring, so I assume you are at the sort of technician level, but were you a sort of crew chief, project manager by the time you were out of grad school, or can you give us a little bit of background on that sort of aspect of your career?
So while I was in graduate school, I also was getting a certificate in GIS. And then I decided, because I was used to this program, and I thought maybe, in fact, it was my current husband's idea. He's like, listen, it seems like maybe you should go get a graduate degree in GIS too, because at the time that was a thing. A lot of archaeologists were kind of doing dual, not that they were getting a separate degree in it, but they were getting at least certificates, or they were getting very familiar with GIS so that they could have those capabilities. And because with smaller companies, having that capability helps you be more marketable. And so I went, and at the same university, and also this allowed me to stay in the residence, continue living there, because we weren't ready to leave yet. We didn't know what the next step was going to be. And I had a job, but in California, it can be very expensive. And so I enrolled in the graduate program for GIS, interdisciplinary, and my thesis was on predictive modeling. And so specifically regarding the mainland sites in Santa Barbara County and the Channel Islands, and looking at the differences there. And so I was, again, going to grad school again. I had with the company, I was still working on the same project for the most part, but I was also working for another company because I had decided that my archaeology thesis was on a site in Santa Barbara, the actual city of Santa Barbara. It was the village, the main village that was there, Sihigtun. And I fell in love with Santa Barbara, and I decided I wanted to be there someday. I wanted to live there and bring my kids there someday. And so I made a concerted effort to put my name out there to different companies that had offices in Santa Barbara. And I got a as-needed position with one of them and started doing faunal analysis for them. And I was able to do that in my kitchen. They would let me take the collection with me, a certain part of the collection. I would work at the lab at the school, and sometimes at home. And I would do this, at night while my kids were sleeping. And so I was working for that original company and working for this other company. And that other company, I really wasn't doing any monitoring or any kind of technician work for them. I was only doing faunal analysis for the most part. The other company I was working for, I had moved up. I was managing crews. We had shifted from monitoring soil sampling. There were like 6,000 borings that occurred over an almost 6,000 acre area. And so that, lasted a few years. And then we did surveys of the entire area, and which sounds a little backwards, but you would actually do the survey first, but there's reasons behind why that happened. And so we did surveys and did a phase one. And so I was I was actually the lead cartographer, and we ended up having 170 sites that had to be mapped the old fashioned way with the tape and compass. And so I came up with a legend and a method that was used for every single site, which was a really neat opportunity because this is one of the most terrific sites or complex of sites in Southern California, including one of the most incredible rock art sites there is in North America. And so we were able to start from the beginning. I had suggested this to my supervisor at the time. I said, what about, he goes, oh, your maps are amazing. And I'm like, this was only a couple sites in. I'm like, well, why don't we, what do you think about, let's just have a convention of how we do every single site, and all maps have to look the same. And so that's what we ended up doing. And we ended up finding like 170 sites, which we didn't know at the time that was going to happen, but it ended up being a really good thing in the end. And so I started training people on how to map correctly. And so now that kind of carried over into my graduate degree and into the end of my graduate degree for archaeology and the beginning of my graduate degree in GIS. And so it was a really awesome opportunity to use my skills and to grow my skills in a practical way on this site. And so I was, essentially managing crews, the survey. I actually was early on doing that with monitoring. They needed people. They had a lot of projects. And I was steady and dependable and worked hard. And so I was put in charge of certain tasks on the site and various tasks on the site so that the overall supervisor didn't have to worry about whether or not things were going to happen correctly. So that gave me some experience from a managerial perspective on a large site with other disciplines. I can't imagine having a better first job. It really did help build a lot of skills for me moving forward in my career. And so then when that project slowed down, or at least the archaeology aspect of the project slowed down, mitigation happened later, but there was a time in between. And when that happened, I actually decided when my son was going into high school, I said, you know what, I need to have if I'm going to make a move to Santa Barbara, this is it. I did not want to move my son halfway through his high school career. I wanted him to enjoy having a full 4 years at one school. And so I went to the person who was my supervisor at that other company in Santa Barbara. And I said, can I have a full-time job? And he was like, he made it happen. So I got a full-time job, a salaried job. And so I, left the other job, which was winding down anyway, and gave my notice to the other company. They were happy for me and I moved on. And that's what we moved in the week before my son started school and my daughter started her, in elementary school. And that was the beginning of me in Santa Barbara.
What was your career since then? How long have you been in Santa Barbara and what have you been doing since that job?
So I've been in Santa Barbara about 12 years. I was at that company until just a few months ago. There were some things that happened. My boss who had hired me actually ended up leaving the company, and so did the other person that was working and a few others. And it ended up just being me and a few of the as-needs that we had on staff. And so this is an engineering company. So cultural was just one aspect of all the other services that were provided. And so the cultural resource practice director at the time was looking for somebody else to replace who was my boss. And so in the interim, I was managing everything. And I asked if I could have that opportunity, and he was very supportive. He's like, "Yes, let's see how this works out." And actually, I think he was already kind of going that direction, but maybe he was just kind of waiting for me to ask. But so I was given this opportunity to manage this regional practice, and I had learned a lot from my predecessor, and was always asking for new opportunities, which he usually gave me, and. So I was, even though, sometimes, and I tell my kids this, is that, when you have an opportunity that's presented to you, you cannot wait until you think you're ready for it. Sometimes you just have to take advantage of that opportunity and move forward, and you will find a way to be appropriate for that role. And so I learned and grew in the role that I was given. And as I grew in the role that I was given, success happened. We did very well. And then I was given the oversight of our busiest office that was down in the LA area. So now I was managing a very large area of California from the cultural resource perspective and managing more people. And then that definitely, that definitely seasoned me further as a professional and as a manager and a supervisor. I've always have had a passion for training others and helping others in their career. And so this allowed me the opportunity to do that. I'd also been, established some really good relationships with both agencies and clients. And so was able to build our practice and build our business to be quite a bit larger than it was before I was in charge. And then just recently I moved to a company that actually was one of my clients for 10 years, actually. And we had just a great working relationship. I really enjoy their company and the way that they look at business and how they grow business and how they grow professionals. And so they offered me an opportunity and to begin their cultural resource practice. And so that's carries me to today. And that's what I'm doing now is I'm developing a nationwide, corporate-wide, it's actually eventually will be international as well, but a corporate-wide practice for this large engineering company. And it's been a terrific and very busy 5 months so far.
Wow, it's quite a career. I mean, not over yet either, Heather.
That's why I encourage people. You cannot, and that probably, I think I'm glad that we're doing this because I have a perspective. Sometimes I think that's different than other people on the show. Not always different. We think a lot alike, but there are some differences. And I really believe you have to be your own advocate in this business. In any business, you have to be your own advocate. And if you're not, it's going to be a harder road for you. It is a hard road when you're on your own advocate because then you have more work, right? But it's work that you have pursued. You have to go after these opportunities. And sometimes you're the one who has to go and identify the opportunity and go and make that happen. And you can't give up. And you're going to get a lot of no's. And no's teach you just as many as much as yeses do. And in fact, and they teach you more many times than the yeses do. But you have to forge forward. You can't sit back in this business and wait for people to make it happen for you, for somebody to identify you and your talent. You have to have goals, and you have to see what your talents are. You have to also understand what your weaknesses are. And it's your job to be your own advocate and to make things happen for you in this business.
So we're pretty much probably running out of time, but I just wanted to throw out one last question to sort of wrap this all up. And that is, looking at sort of hindsight, your full career, or careers, I should say, it's been multiple careers. Looking back, is there anything in hindsight, you would change? Would you have gotten into archaeology sooner, or would you have done hockey longer, or, is there anything there you sort of in hindsight you would do a little bit different?
Wow, that's a good question.
I should also say the answer could be no as well. You don't. There's sort of that push in those sort of questions where it's like making you think if you need to answer that, and then yes, I would. Right. But you don't have to. It's just it's just something I was thinking about.
Yeah, I think I had alluded to it earlier that refereeing has absolutely helped me be a better archaeologist and a better manager and a better business person. And so I would not have changed that experience. There were times, I think if I were to change anything, it would be how I look at no's, how I look at what I perceived as failures, which they were failures. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have to have failures in life in order to learn and in order to have an impetus behind that next step. And sometimes that fork in the road is not a choice. Sometimes that fork in the road, the choice is made for you. And it's what you do with that choice, how you respond to that choice that determines your success or otherwise. And with hockey, I was very focused. I was the very first female referee in professional hockey. I'm still basically the only female. Well, there's one in Europe, but I was the first one. It took a long time for any other female official to come up in hockey from a professional sense. And, at the time, this is the early 90s, it was sad for me. I wanted to go to the Olympics. There was politics. I should have gone to the Olympics. I was the best one for the job, but it didn't happen. And it was just, at the time, sometimes it would be an embarrassment for me to say I didn't go to the Olympics. But it taught me more, I think, not having gone than it would if I had. I see a lot of people that have gone to the Olympics, and a lot of times when you reach the pinnacle of something and you reach your goal, a lot of times people just sit back and they're like, I reached that. That's the one thing I can say I did. And it kind of takes that drive out of you in some ways. And because I had that no, and I had other no's in hockey and other areas, it kept me hungry, and it kept me driven, and it kept me actually to my best use, which is where I'm at now. I do think that everything that I learned in all these other aspects, the getting my teacher's credential and having a focus on helping others find their own professional, in a hands-on career like upholstery, where you can actually have your own business, where it's different than most vocations. You can be very entrepreneurial with it. So that helped me being a businessman. Yes. Do I work for a company? I don't have my own company, but in order to be a really good business person in a company, you have to have an entrepreneurial sense. And so that that helped me. So every single step along the way has helped me. And I really believe that I was meant to be an archaeologist. I believe I was meant to be in this moment right now that I am at right now. And I believe that I was meant to have some of the struggles I had in previous careers and in a previous company, even the company I was just at. I was meant to have those struggles so that I would be pushed to move into this next stage of my career, and so that I could take those lessons that I've learned to help others and to just be a better version of myself professionally and personally. So I don't think that I have any regrets. Are there things that I wished I had looked at differently, that I hadn't allowed myself to wallow too long in and be too disappointed or beat myself up? Yeah, but it's what bred in me what I needed in order to be successful at this point in my life. So how's that for an answer?
That's brilliant. I think that's the perfect way to end this episode. So thank you, Heather. Thank you, listeners, as well. And we'll see you all in the field.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.arcpodnet.com/CRMArcPodcast. Please comment and share anywhere you see the show. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website, or just email chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Support the show and the network at arcpodnet.com/members. Get some swag and extra content while you're there. Send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field. Goodbye. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.